The parlor was quiet. The fire was burning low. 4 women sat in the afternoon light, waiting. When the front door opened, the man on the threshold did not finish stepping inside. 6 weeks earlier, in a small town in Vermont, his wife had walked to her mailbox in the snow. She had been married to him for 28 years. Margaret brought the mail inside and sat at the kitchen table. The third envelope was addressed to R&C Whitfield, Manchester, New Hampshire. The address was wrong. The names were wrong. But the surname was hers. Inside was a Christmas card, a photograph of a family in front of a tree, a woman with auburn hair, 2 teenagers, and a man in a sweater Margaret had never seen, in a house she had never been in. She recognized his teeth before she recognized his face. It was Richard. She did not call him. She did not call her daughter. The next morning, she drove 3 hours south. She wrote Caroline a letter, by hand, asking her to meet at a diner halfway between their towns. Caroline came alone. Margaret did not show her the Christmas card first. She showed her a wedding photograph from 28 years ago. Caroline sat in her car for 40 minutes before she drove home. She would cry that night after her children were asleep, but before she drove away, the 2 women had decided one thing. They would not tell him. Margaret contacted a lawyer 2 towns over. Sarah Bell listened for an hour without writing anything down. The Vermont marriage was the legal one. The New Hampshire marriage was bigamy, voidable, a felony, a federal violation through 20 years of joint tax filings under a variant name. Richard had been committing crimes for 2 decades. But the legal step, Sarah told her, was not the most powerful step. Caroline pulled down a box from her attic. 20 years of conference itineraries, photographs from vacations Margaret had never been on. She sat with it for 2 days. Then she began to sort. The 2 women began to meet. Once a week, then twice. By the 3rd meeting, the list on their yellow legal pad had 41 names. Margaret continued to live with him. She made dinner. She slept in their bed. When he came back from his weekend conference, she did not flinch when he kissed her cheek. The hardest visit was to Eleanor, Richard's mother, 78 years old. Margaret brought tea. She told Eleanor only that she needed to ask a question about Richard's father. Eleanor set her cup down. For a long moment she did not speak. Then she told Margaret something she had never told anyone. Richard's father had been unfaithful for the last 15 years of his life. Eleanor had known. She had said nothing. She had spent 22 years regretting that silence. Then she asked Margaret what Richard had done. By the end of week 4, Sarah had everything. 2 marriages, 2 sets of tax returns, 2 professional licenses, a complete paper architecture of Richard's 20-year double life. On a Tuesday evening, Margaret sat next to Richard on the couch. During a commercial, she mentioned that Eleanor wanted the family for Sunday dinner in 2 weeks. Richard nodded without looking away. He told her that sounded fine. Hannah came home from college that Friday. They drove home through the dark, and 5 miles from the house, Margaret began to speak. Hannah did not cry. She sat on the edge of her bed for 2 hours, holding a framed photograph of her father, recalibrating 22 years. The next morning, she came downstairs and asked her mother one question. What did her mother need her to do? Caroline drove north into Vermont midweek, while Richard was at his Vermont practice. She was meeting Eleanor for the first time. Eleanor watched Caroline carefully, at the way she held her coffee cup, at the way she folded her napkin. Then Eleanor reached across the table and took Caroline's hand for 1 second. That was all. Saturday evening, Margaret packed a small overnight bag. Richard, half watching from the doorway, asked her what she was doing. She told him she was going to her mother's, and she would meet him at Eleanor's at noon. He nodded and went back to the television. It was the last evening they spent under the same roof. Sunday morning, 9:47. Sarah Bell electronically filed the petition for annulment, the bigamy disclosure, and the federal referral. By 11:15, the documents had been transmitted. 3 cars were already parked at Eleanor's cottage. Smoke rose from the chimney. Richard was driving north from his practice. He thought he was running 10 minutes late for a family lunch. Inside the parlor, 4 women sat in the afternoon light. Margaret on the sofa, in a deep green dress, her wedding band no longer on her finger. Hannah beside her, Caroline across from them, Eleanor in her own chair, her cane against the side table. The fire was lit. No one was speaking. Eleanor had not raised her voice in 50 years. She did not intend to raise it now. The front door opened. Richard stepped in, snow on the shoulders of his overcoat, gloves in his hand. He was smiling. The smile died before he had finished crossing the threshold. He saw Caroline first, then his daughter, then his mother. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Eleanor spoke first, very quietly. She told him to take his coat off and sit down. He did not move. He understood his options in real time. He could not deny. Caroline was in his mother's parlor. He could not bargain. Both wives knew each other now. He could not leave. His mother had told him to sit. He could not apologize. There was no apology that survived this room. His daughter would not look at him. His wife would not look at him. Caroline would not look at him. Only his mother was looking at him, with an expression he had last seen the day his father died. He took off his coat. He sat down in the chair she had indicated. He kept his gloves in his hand. The 4 women drank their tea. The legal proceedings would take 14 months. Richard would lose his practice, both houses, his license, and the name he had used for 20 years. His mother would not speak to him again before she died, 2 winters later. But the moment that ended him was not a courtroom. It was a Sunday parlor in Vermont, where his mother had been waiting for him. If this story stayed with you, the channel has more like it. Quiet betrayals, patient answers, revenge served cold, exactly the way it was meant to be served. Subscribe and stay for the next one.